Welcome everyone to the special edition webinar. We've invited Arlene Rosen to talk about a topic that is difficult. She did a podcast with Dr. Rob recently, but we wanted to have this opportunity so that people could join and ask questions as well. So Arlene, tell us a little bit about the work. I know how challenging this can be, but to have a more compassionate way of dealing with complex situations. I just think it's worth thinking about. Is there a different way to do it? So,
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being able to talk to people about what happens when you decide to separate and divorce. Um, in addition to having complex circumstances happening in your life. My name is Arlene Rosen, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex addictions therapist. I also do discernment counseling. I'm a collaborative divorce coach and a mediator, licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida. And I am the president of our collaborative law group and president-elect for our state group. So I've been very involved in restructuring family systems and how to do it in a way that is not going to be more detrimental to the family, to the children, to the extended family system. So if you would like, I'll just jump in.
please do. Yeah, and you now know why I invited her to join us with all the credentials. But collaborative divorce coach. I mean, those words sound contradictory, collaborative and divorce. It's just really, I'm hoping that we can give another perspective of navigating this. So thank you.
Yeah. So we all know about litigation, and we've all heard stories about how long it takes, how much money it costs. Divorce is costly anyway. And there are multiple different processes that you can use that are outside of the court that are legally binding processes with a supportive team around you so that you're getting the information that you need. So let me just start by talking about mediation. What is the difference between mediation and collaborative divorce or arbitration, or some people call it a kitchen table divorce?
Mm,
So a kitchen table divorce is when you have two attorneys sitting there with you, or an attorney sitting there with you, and you're working it out. I think you have to have a pretty regulated two people sitting in front who are willing to separate the assets and understand what the parenting plan is going to be and be in agreement for the most part with that process. Working with a mediator, the process is still out of court. All of these processes that are out of court are confidential. Uh,
okay.
yeah, I come to this with a lot of a lot of experience in my life. I'm a child of divorce, and fortunately, my parents did it in a way that was gracious enough. I've had a divorce not by choice. It was litigated for 4.5 years without custody issues because the children were older. Um, and all the while doing this kind of work, which is kind of ironic in our lives when we find ourselves um, in a position that we don't want to be, which is what most people are here listening to this webinar are in a place that they really haven't wanted to be, or when you got married, you didn't think about what this would look like if you have to get a divorce, or if you're dealing with betrayal trauma or sex addiction.
Correct. Yeah.
So very complex. The out of court options are confidential. If you really wanted to get curious about somebody that's been divorced, you can go to the courthouse and pay some money and get all the transcripts and know what happened in their lives.
Mm.
So when we're dealing with complicated situations like sex addiction and betrayal trauma, we may not want other people to know what was happening. We don't want our children to know what's happening. We may want to have some privacy around that, which these processes afford. So, mediation, you'll sit with a trained mediator and again, work out all of your agreements. Sometimes in mediation, I'll serve as a coach, um, just to help keep the temperature down in the room, to keep the emotional temperature down, because we're talking about very difficult things. How am I going to afford my life? Are my children going to be okay? I've already had so much loss um, with addiction, and now I'm looking at loss with my um, in laws and with our friends and community. So there's so much going on. So sometimes in mediation, when it gets difficult, a mediator might call me in to do some coaching work or co mediation. Now, like I said, you'll work with a mediator. The two of you will be in the same room for the most part and come to agreements. Once you have come to your agreements, then you'll take the document, the memorandum of understanding, to an outside attorney just to put another set of eyes on it, make sure nothing was forgotten about or has to be considered differently. And then somebody will act as a scribe, um, make the, do all the documents that are needed for your locality. And then then you're divorced. They'll file. Now, collaborative divorce, which happens to be my favorite type of process for people, there's multiple people on the team. Both people have their own individual, collaboratively trained attorney. I say that collaboratively trained attorney because it's really important that you have somebody who can sit in a room with all the parties, all the clients, and not be acrimonious. That's one of the biggest problems that I find with the litigation. Um, you can be okay when you're going into it. We need to get divorced. We're going to start the divorce process. Whatever happens in your municipality, how they handle it. Um, you go through the motions, and just from the nature of the winning and losing, it's going to become more acrimonious. And the time is not, you have no control over the time because you have to wait for the docket, wait for the paperwork to come back. And it really becomes very difficult. A funny story that I have, if I may, in my own,
Please.
yeah, in my own litigation, my ex-husband's attorney, who he didn't keep, um, he would see me in the hallway. I know a lot of attorneys because of the work that I do. And he would look at me and go, he wouldn't smile, nothing. And right after they no longer worked together, he called me up to do some work and he's joking around with me. So he was not my attorney. He was not, my advocate. But I knew, he's operating in a certain way with me, acrimonious. And um, my attorney and him, who knew each other, are chit-chatting and everything's fine and it's jovial. But, when you get into the courthouse, you're in that role of, I am not your advocate. You're my opponent. Um, so back to collaborative, and sorry to jump around so much.
No, I'm tracking. Thank you.
Good. I hope everybody else is. Um, in collaborative divorce, you sign a document that's called a participation agreement. And what the participation agreement states is that you're going to be transparent. Um, you're going to be respectful, and you're not going to litigate. And if you do decide to litigate, you have to find new attorneys, new professionals,
Mm,
a new coach if you want to coach for your litigated divorce. Um, the reason being is if you're being transparent in a collaborative process or in a mediation, then you do not want to have that level of transparency when you're at war with somebody. Um, the idea of if you think about a whole piece of paper, the judge is only seeing about this much of it, right? They get what's required. And then you have somebody outside of your system, outside of what your nuances are, that are making a decision for you. So in the collaborative process, you'll work with the divorce coach or the communication specialist. Most of the time we use, in the Philadelphia, South Jersey area, we use one coach, unless it's a very complicated case. Then we'll bring in another coach so that, we're continuing to lower the emotional intensity. You have the two collaboratively trained attorneys, and we bring in a financial neutral. We can also bring in a child specialist. And what this child specialist does is act as a voice for the children. The children cannot make decisions. They don't get to be decision makers for the adults, hopefully, because that's a whole different issue when the children are parentified. Um, so it sounds like there are a ton of people in this process, and people always ask me, um, "Oh, this is going to cost so much money. I have to pay for all these people." Well, when you're working with me, I'm doing the parenting plan. So the two attorneys are not sitting back and forth, going back and forth um, in a pretty unhealthy communication style of I'll talk to my client, I'll talk to the attorney, I'll talk to the other attorney, and back and forth. Um, they are going to, I'll do it with the clients with agreement. When we come to an understanding of what the parenting plan looks like, then we'll um, give it to everybody else. We use the financial neutral as like a clearinghouse. And your financial neutral can be a certified divorce financial analyst, um, an accountant, somebody who's knowledgeable about what the restructuring looks like, what the taxes look like. They really add that benefit. And then the two attorneys, again, are not having discussions about whose numbers are right. So in that way, it's a cost savings. Right? So they're the people who are involved. Process. So what people typically will do is they'll do a consultation with me, and I'll do a free consultation, talk to them about the process. I love talking about this. And once they agree and sign my documents and retain me, then we find a team for them. While they're finding their attorneys and the financial neutral, with guidance, because you have so much crisis going on in your life when you're thinking about divorce. people really need a little bit of hand holding with a voice, hand holding with a voice. So we'll get the team together. I'll be meeting with the clients to develop goals and interests. I want to hear a little bit more about what brought you here. What you think is going to be really difficult in moving through this process so that I can help you. We'll develop a mission statement, and then the team is going to have a meeting and we're going to talk. And we're going to tell everybody, we're all going to talk about what we have understood from the clients, where we think we need to support them best so that we can come to the agreements. And then we're going to have a first team meeting with all the professionals and the clients with an agenda that's agreed upon by the clients. So there's so much voice in this process. And each meeting continues with either the agenda items that we haven't completed or the new agenda items until we come to all the agreements that are needed in order for the people to restructure. So that's a really quick nuts and bolts of this process.
Can you give, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you give kind of a time frame? I'm sure it varies, but like, do you have kind of a guidance of like often this can be done within X amount of time from the time they do a consult with you till, till you've come to those agreements?
Yeah, often it can take about 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
I've had my shortest case was 2 meetings.
Wow.
Yeah, the people were more in line of what they wanted to do, how they wanted to move through this, how they wanted to operate after. They had a child who had some special needs, and they were committed to staying in the child's life together and being healthy co-parents. The gentleman did have a substance use disorder. And one thing that I really appreciate about this process is we can put things in place so that there's some level of accountability. So this particular case, we made sure there was SoberLink, and he was in agreement of using SoberLink. If anybody doesn't know what that is, it's a alcohol detector. You blow into it and you can see if somebody has alcohol in their system. For people with compulsive sexual behavior, we may want to make sure that we have some kind of internet blockers for pornography. We want to make sure, come to agreements of what the person needs to know, the betrayed partner needs to know, to ensure that there's enough boundaries in place so that they know the children are safe and not exposed to any inappropriate material or exposed to other people who are going to be fleeting if the person relapses. So that is really something that I appreciate when we have, especially when we have complicating issues in the family.
So I hear you, the two person, or I mean the two meeting with the people, and that there's a general time frame. And I have a question too about like who is a good candidate for this? Like, how do you even decide? Like, I know you have an initial consultation, but who would be most likely to be calling you for this?
Well, I've been called by people who are struggling with compulsive sexual, addiction. I've been called by the partners. It really varies. I think it's in somebody's best interest if they know that they have compulsive behaviors, and they know, and they're oh, we lost you, and ag- and they agree that they are going to get a divorce. Um, it doesn't matter really who calls. Sometimes, it varies. So when people do call, I like to have them in the room together when I'm doing my consultation. Because while we're there, I'm answering all the questions that they might have. And I'm also seeing how they interact with one another. I
But I
have
hear it's also part of the we agree we're going to get a divorce. So you're probably not working with somebody where they're really resistant to getting a divorce. Is that fair?
That's fair. So if somebody has that situation where one person is, I think that that's a counseling issue.
Oh, yeah.
If one person is um, agreed, I just cannot do this anymore. I can't stay in this marriage. And then you have the other person who is um, really wanting to make the marriage work. A little bit of counseling to help the couple come to a reality tested place of this is where we're at, and I no longer want to be in this marriage. Now, there is discernment counseling. If you have two people who are considering divorce, it's a 1 to 5 session model that assists people to find what path they're going to stay on.
Mm,
Are they going to stay as they are? Are they going to get a divorce? Or are they going to commit to, like, no joke, 6 months marriage counseling with both
mm.
feet in the door? Because
So a discernment, so the discernment coaching, that would be the two of them working with a coach or okay.
working with a counselor.
Oh,
So
oh, counselor.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, this is discernment counseling is a modality that was developed by a gentleman named Bill Doherty. Because what he was seeing is couples counseling cannot work with couples where one person is not sure that they really want to invest time in this. So this modality allows us in the 1 to 5 session model, and it's 1 to 5 sessions because if you go past 5 sessions, then you're deciding to stay as you are, which is a choice. Sometimes that's an important choice, especially when people are new in recovery and new to discovery because they're so flooded. They're so much in crisis since their world is turned upside down that they can't really make a clear decision of what the longevity of anything is going to be because so much is uncertain. So I am a certified discernment counselor. And so that modality is not for somebody who says, I absolutely do not want to be married to you anymore, because then there's nothing to discern for that person, right? That would be more of a, I know you don't want to get divorced, but I don't want to, you know, that would be more of a couples counseling um, conversation, and sometimes in the collaborative process, we will see somebody who says, I don't want this. This is not, this was not my choice.
Mm-hmm.
I want to work on the marriage. And that's the nice thing about having the coach, because there's a couple different roles that the coach utilizes, or, what we do. We help the team stay on track. We act as a facilitator in the collaborative process. And we also help the client stay in place.
I could see, I mean, and this is complicated. First of all, I hear this is all judgment free. Like all of this is like everybody's choosing their path. So I really appreciate that. But I also hear that there are probably some, I want to stay, I want to go, I want to stay, I want to go. So helping them navigate, maybe as part of the discernment, a process that let's come to where we really want to be. And yeah, and it could be we're gonna separate. And
Mhm.
even though there's pain and sadness about that, ultimately, that is what we're choosing to do. So,
Mm.
but yeah, complicated, and also like I really appreciate that whatever you choose to do, like that's okay, and we're going to help you navigate that space. So,
Yeah, and we don't really want people in the collaborative process who are in a place of discernment.
right. Oh, I can understand it's discernment, and then if you're moving forward, we
Mhm.
can move forward with collaboration.
Exactly, because, um, then you are, spending your resources in some with so many professionals around you, we would stop the process. There have been times where we have stopped the process when we discovered, like, there was a gambling addiction in a
Mm,
case I was working in, and this was discovered during the process, and the woman, um, who was struggling with the gambling addiction needed to get into treatment before we can move on, just to have some health for her to make good decisions.
understandable, and if you're in active addiction, you can't show up as transparent. So if that's one of the requirements, those two are contradictory.
Exactly, exactly. Um, so, you know, when we're talking about sex addiction and betrayal trauma, um, I speak to a lot of attorneys and financial neutrals and the other coaches about what does this look like and what are the complexities? Because typically, um, sometimes we see somebody standing in a lot of shame,
Mm,
and sometimes we see somebody standing in anger, dismay, crisis, right? And we want to make sure that everybody is making these decisions in a way that they're going to be able to live with. And once the process is complete, if people need to come back to the process, they can do that. If there's
what
issue,
does that mean if they would need to come back, like something's
um,
unresolved or an area was left out or something?
something changes.
Oh, okay.
Parenting plan needs to
Oh,
change.
okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
Financial situations have changed.
Okay.
Potentially a relapse
Yeah.
might bring somebody back to a process to say, you cannot have the children 50% of the time or whatever the agreements are made. Uh,
Yes.
an additional piece of this process and why I bring up the shame and the trauma is um, this process allows it doesn't necessarily have to go by what your state guidelines are for, say,
Oh,
child
interesting.
or alimony,
Hmm.
right? So, Tammy, if you and I were getting divorced and the state guideline is that I would get um, $1,000 in child support, and you say, but Arlene, I know you really need $4,000 for our
Hmm.
children who like to shop,
Hmm.
right? You're
Hmm.
able to do that. And we have all the professionals around just to make sure, like, okay, for me, when we're talking about the issues of the emotional issues, or if there was a betrayal, I want to make sure that we're coming from a place of, you know, of reality, of not talking out of shame or I'm talking out of look at what you did to me. You turned my life upside down, and I'm going to take you for everything. Because healthy parents, right? You want to have healthy children, have healthier parents. My hopes in every collaborative divorce are that people are going to develop some skills to be able to negotiate with each other outside of
Mm,
this bubble that we offer.
that makes sense. So yeah, we've learned that we can navigate through this. So if we apply these skills,
Right?
they may not need to come back to you,
Mm.
for that next level of things. So,
Yeah.
so we've got a bunch of questions. Let's take a little pause and look at them. If you hit Q&A at the bottom of your screen, you can follow along. So 4 years since D-Day, first year since, or 1 year since the last D-Day, my sex and love addict partner has ongoing struggles with keeping secrets and minimizing behaviors, showing empathy or understanding the impact on me. We have a couples coach. He has insight, says, I need him to get it or not get it, but not in between. I am stuck. How do I decide to end this or hold on to hope for more progress? Hmm.
Well, that's a good question. Um, you could go to discernment counseling with that because you're on the fence. Um, if you go to discernmentcounseling.com, you will be able to find a practitioner in your state. If you're in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Florida, I can certainly help you.
I'm putting the link for the website that Arlene mentioned right there in the chat. So check that out.
So you'll be able to, that would be something that you have to get some clarity on, because it sounds like we know that we have hope that our partner is going to be healthy, manage their addiction, and you'll be safe. So really going to somebody who's skilled and understands the complexity, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would just shared with somebody, somebody was reaching out via an email, and I said, no addict changes until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. And if he can, and I don't know you guys, you're sending this as anonymous, but I'm reading, he can, kind of flounder around and not really do the work, so going to a discernment counselor that is helping you decide to stay or go, he may go, I should probably take this more seriously. It really depends on, the level of work he's doing. And gosh, we have a fantastic residential treatment program for guys like him who are not really getting it. And like all the things that you're talking about, like we have people that have not acted out, in a year or more, but they aren't getting the rest of it. And so the treatment program isn't just about stopping the problematic behaviors, it's about being on a different path. So but I love this suggestion of, like, let's go see a discernment counselor and see if we want to even be in this thing, because that might, I think that would be great for you to decide, but also like that might be, oh, she's actually thinking of leaving, like that wake up call can be
Right.
a major alarm bell.
Right. Also seeing if whether or not the person is willing to make the changes that you need in order to live in this relationship.
Yes, because and there's hope for people who are willing to do the work, but recovery is about actions. It's not about, like, well, I hope I don't ever act. No, it's like I have to do the actions, that cause integrity and to be esteemable and to have a course correction, so you hoping without him doing actions, is not a good, not a good recipe for you. And okay, so the next one, we aren't married and we do not have children. I changed things around in my life in this commitment that has made me financially dependent on my addict partner. For several reasons, I cannot go out and get a job or get financial support from family. My partner and I have a verbal agreement about financial commitments that wouldn't leave me homeless or without transportation if we did a therapeutic healing separation or he suddenly terminates the relationship. I want to turn these verbal agreements into written contracts to be notarized by a notary. Do you have advice or feedback on this concept or process? Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question
Yeah.
because some people are not married, but they have shared assets. I would welcome somebody into the collaborative process to make agreements. So, if you need that added support, you could go to mediation. But if you need the added support of having the full professional team around you, then collaborative would be a great option for you.
Can you speak to the verbal agreement versus having a written and notarized document?
Well, I'm not a lawyer,
Right.
and you had verbal agreements. And if you feel like you need some kind of written contract, a verbal agreement is a verbal agreement. Something written, notarized. You may want to contact an attorney. You can go to collaborativepractice.com. It's the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, and you can find the list of all the collaborative professionals in the world because it's a worldwide organization. So you may want to call a collaborative attorney and say, what can we do? What's the difference going to be? But you also, if you're not married, there's a lot of reasons why people haven't gotten married. Years ago, you couldn't get married in a same-sex relationship, right? So there's a lot of people out there who haven't gotten married, and they have obligations to each other.
And I hear with the question, and I'm grateful for the inquiry, but I'm also hearing there's a level of concern. And so it seems like it would be worth, getting it
Mhm.
documented so that there is a piece of paper that you both have agreed to. This is our terms of agreement. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but
Yeah.
it's also one of those where what the best defense is a good offense. No, the best offense is a good defense. Sorry about that. Yeah, but it's like, like if it will help you sleep at night to have that agreement. And it would also be interesting, to see what your partner is willing, like, yeah, I'm willing to document this, on a piece of paper. Great.
Mhm.
That would be a helpful sign too. So,
Exactly.
okay. The next one, when does one move from discernment to marriage counseling? And would it be the same discernment counselor?
Another good question.
Mhm.
Um, so when things move from discernment counseling to marriage counseling is when the couple decides we're going to try this and we're going to put our feet into the marriage and try counseling. No guarantees, but it's definitely an option. When I meet with people in discernment counseling, if they choose to get a divorce, then I'm going to talk to them about that process and help them with that process because discernment counseling isn't really therapy. So it wouldn't be a conflict or a dual relationship for me to follow my ethics. Or if they wanted to work with me in marriage counseling, I can certainly do that with them. But when they decide to move from one to the other is if they decide after the first discernment session that, maybe we should give this a try, then we're going to go to marriage counseling.
So there's a follow-up question. How long does discernment counseling last, and at which point do couples typically come to a decision? And I had written down, you said it's usually, a handful of sessions, because
Mhm.
otherwise it needs to move to marriage counseling. But it could really be, in a one session they decide that.
Right. So if it's a 1 to 5 session model, after the fifth session, they wouldn't necessarily go to marriage counseling, but they've made a decision to just stay as they are. It's path one. That's what
Okay.
path one. They've decided now is not the time to make a decision, uh, either to have marriage counseling or to get a divorce. So we're just going to stay in this place. And I keep saying, I always say to people, that is a decision. Sometimes it is just not the right time. And you're just not ready to move on to make a decision of whether or not we're going to stay married or we're going to get divorced. So, the therapist can definitely help two people who are in that place of how are you going to cohabitate. What is it going to be like to live together when you know you're not committed to one way or the other without becoming dysregulated or, yeah.
So there's a follow-up question. So I'm going to skip the next one and go to it. So the follow-up is, if one or both of the individuals are vacillating between staying or going, does the discernment counselor provide guidance on what the best path may be based on the expertise and knowledge, as well as observations of the couple?
I would say no. Because if I would tell you what to do, then you're living my life and you don't know what that looks like. So you may not want to choose that. So, typically counselors aren't going to tell you what to do or what they think is the best way to go. They may reflect back to you, but I think that that would be a hard thing for me to tell somebody what they should be doing or not doing. I can tell you what I observe, but I
Yeah,
hope that answers the
yeah, no,
question.
and I agree. I mean, I think, with the exception of like, imminent peril like domestic violence and things like that, then a counselor is probably going to really encourage you to get out. But other than that, it really is, what is best, for the two of you. And it's hard. And here's my experience. I have seen, especially with betrayed partners, where, like they'll be saying one thing, but you can tell their heart's in a different place, and when their head and heart align, then they've made a decision, and that could be to stay or go, but like they can be going, I know I need to go, but I still love whatever, all of that type of thing. And then at some point it's like, okay, I see the changes. I see that there's hope. I'm willing to stay. Or it can be like, I see that this person's, choosing not to do anything, and I can't, and okay, but I really see. So I think your discernment counselor can help you align. And if both of you are aligned on the same decision, then you've got a path. And even if it is like, is being shared with Arlene, like your decision is, we're going to stay, as we are, but can we do it a little, a little less messy, perhaps, than what could be happening right now? So,
Exactly.
okay, the next question. How does neurodiversity impact the repair process? My partner is ADHD and now learning about his autism as well. His executive function and sensory challenges make it hard for him to be consistent and proactive. So here's the deal with that. We have Candace Christensen coming back to talk specifically about neurodivergence. So if
Mm.
you're talking about neurodivergence, as it affects, a collaborative divorce process, Arlene can talk to that. But otherwise, if you're looking at neurodivergence and recovery, Candace did she's an expert. She is the expert on that. She did a webinar with us in February, and she's coming back in June. So, but do you see people who struggle with ADHD, et cetera, being able to
Ab-
handle a collaborative divorce.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And if you want, I totally agree with Tammy. Listen to Candace.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
She's the
uh,
one.
she
Yeah.
is the one. She is,
Mhm.
she consults for when we have clients who are on the neurodivergent spectrum, and like, because you can't just go, well, they're this, so therefore, it really is, identifying. So she works with our trained staff, when we have residential clients, but she will be coming in. I'll look it up in a moment, but I think it's the middle of June. She's going to be joining me on a webinar, but I'll find that.
Yeah. So
Okay, the
stay.
next question. Go ahead.
Yeah. I said, stay tuned for Candace.
Yes. Could a collaborative divorce work in a situation where there are large marital waste and hidden funds? Wow, that's a good question.
Yeah. So great question. So we're looking for transparency, and sometimes we don't have that. And the financial neutrals are pretty adept to say, when they get paperwork or this is out of my scope, I pretty much stay in my lane and not do the financial piece. But what I do know is they're able to see discrepancies, or if there's large funds coming in and out, they'll definitely question that. So you do have the protections in a collaborative case where you have people with their expertise doing specifically their role. So if the attorneys are not going to be doing the emotional piece, they typically say, call Arlene, or the parenting plan piece, or what do we do to put protections in place so that there's safety in the co-parenting relationship for the children.
You talked about the situation where there was the female partner was struggling with gambling addiction. How often, or like, because I would assume there would be times when this comes up where they're moving into a collaborative uncoupling, and then all of a sudden there's discovery of hidden funds or waste or whatever that might not have been transparent from the beginning of the session. Is that something that happens kind of regularly?
Not regularly, but when it does happen, we we're always going to try to keep people in process, because this is the most respectful process you can use. Your other option would be litigation at that point. Um, and frankly, the courts aren't, I do not believe that the courts are really looking back at if there's infidelity.
Interesting.
They're not, unless there is like a child welfare issue, um, or, concern about active substance abuse, they're not looking back. They're not going to be thinking about the nuances of sex addiction or betrayal trauma. So, because it's so layered, I really do believe, typically in my practice group, people will look to me to work with the addiction issues, especially if it's sex addiction. But if a court doesn't care about what has happened in the past, they're only looking to how are we going to resolve what this is going to look like for the two of you in the future. And my own experience, if you expect fairness in the court, forget it.
Yeah, we did a series, should I say or should I go? And the last one was an attorney who's also a mental health professional. He talked about like the court doesn't care about emotional things. It doesn't care about, fairness, or I mean, like it's going to look at
Yeah.
fairness from this legal standpoint, but that's it. So I'm thinking, as if you're looking to do this as a collaborative way, if there is an imbalance, couldn't there be, as part of the collaborative, that there is more of an evening out? Like if there's been
Mhm.
hidden funds, if there's been whatever, that you're taking that into consideration as you're looking to uncouple.
Yeah, that would be definitely a part of the discussion. And,
Yeah.
one thing that, I did not say, or if I did, forgive me for repeating myself, I'm old. Um, Within the process, as we're meeting with the full team, in between those sessions, you're talking to the financial neutral and the attorneys, or you'll come to me if if I see that you're really having a hard time, we're going to meet. So I can meet with you separately. So I will do that. And you did ask me before about assessments. We are assessing for domestic violence. And we want to see where the power imbalances are. Sometimes we'll do a two-coach model, like I was saying. If we know we have a very, very difficult case or there's significant mental health issues, not capacity issues. We haven't seen one. I haven't seen one where there's significant capacity issues. But power imbalances, well, we know in healthy marriages there's power imbalances, right? Systems happen the way they do and they work the way they do. So collaborative is really a good way to be able to balance out, um, the power imbalances.
Well, and like the question that was earlier where they weren't married, but the
Mm.
person had given up their job, et cetera, so it creates a power imbalance just because there's a financial need,
Right,
based on how the relationship developed.
right.
Okay, the next question. Unmarried, betrayed here. I contacted multiple lawyers and none of them would see us to create and notarize documents because we're not married. That's why I'm resorting to a general notary. Oh, that's interesting.
Mm. So, I definitely would reach out to some of the collaborative professionals. Um, if you need help finding somebody in where you're located, you can reach out to me. I can help find somebody or see if there's somebody I know in your area.
Yeah, because I'm like, it's a contract. I mean, like basically, so like at some point, even a contract lawyer, I would think would be able to help. So that's,
Mm.
I'm sorry that you've bumped up against that, and that someone wasn't willing to create a legal document. So, but
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, and I would think if you went to somebody who traditionally does litigation, they might not, it's not in their wheelhouse to be creative like we can be with the
Yeah,
alternative dispute resolution processes.
yeah, yeah. And not even a dispute. It sounds like you are trying to create a safety net so that there isn't a dispute in the future. So to me, that
Exactly.
feels a little proactive. Like we're just, we're making an agreement. We're
Mhm.
making this, we're documenting it so that we both have the understanding and there's no,
Yeah.
there's no blurriness about it. So
Yeah, this is what people would call, if they were married, a postnuptial agreement. So, but you just don't have the legal document saying you're married. So, yeah, I'm sure a collaborative professional would be happy to assist with that.
So with a collaborative divorce, as you bring up post-nup, do you find that some people have a post-nup in place that are looking to do a collaborative divorce, or is that if they have a post-nup, they don't necessarily, I mean, I don't even know what that looks like. So yeah.
Um, I have not seen one in a collaborative case. I've seen a prenuptial. Was there a postnuptial? No. No, I have not seen one. So, but I don't see where that would be an issue.
Right.
It,
I don't either, but I'm just wondering if, well, because they have a post-nup, things are more laid out,
well, they
perhaps. But
are. Yeah,
yeah.
they are more laid out, but there may be some other issues that have come up that weren't addressed. Like I would think, certainly if you need to put some parameters in place around parenting plans, when you're doing your marital settlement agreement, and, I would think that you would need to go beyond the postnuptial.
Yeah, it's always messier than like you would imagine. So I really think, having what you're talking about, having the whole team of, of people that are looking out and expert in their area, like even the financial neutral light, like I think that's so helpful to have. Like, I'm just going to look at this from a neutral standpoint and help guide the process. It just feels, I appreciate that this is collaborative and that hopefully the best outcome so that people are having the best ability to move forward.
Mm. Right.
It's tough stuff. So I appreciate your time here. I appreciate you asking or answering questions and sharing all the information and resources. This video will be posted later today on our website, so you can view it or share it with others. And if you've got questions, you can reach out. Arlene, what's the best way to reach out to you?
By email, or you can call me. My email address is Arlene Rosen. I'm sorry, Arlene at peacefulgrowththerapy.com.
And you can always email TAMI at Seeking Integrity, and I'll forward it to her too. So,
Yes. Yeah.
okay. Thank you so
Happy.
much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. All
Thank
right.
you. Appreciate
Take
it.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.